Daniel Cormier was on his show with Chael Sonnen and suggested that the UFC is protecting light heavyweight champion Alex Pereira from Magomed Ankalaev. That's why they booked Ankalaev against Alexander Rakic. And I'm going to talk about that, whether I agree with him or not, in today's video. My name is James Lynch. So shout out to BJ Penn for writing this up. We'll read the quote here from Cormier. Obviously, this is from their recent episode on ESPN. His episode is podcast with Chael Sonnen. Cormier questions Pereira Ankalaev. He says, can I be honest with you? Let's zoom in a little bit so you can see the text. Can I be honest with you? I think he is. I don't know why Pereira's not fighting Ankalaev. I don't know why that's not happening. Like, what I do like is that now Ankalaev has to pass another test, because what the UFC is kind of saying here is that we've got a star. And we know the guy here could be a real potential issue for that star. They will fight eventually. But will they fight? Sorry, I'm doing my best here. But they will fight when we have no other option, and I like it. I don't think you run the risk yet. I somewhat agree with this. I hate to be kind of in the middle here. I don't think it's a great fight for Ankalaev, I don't think Pereira and Ankalaev, I think that's going to be a tough matchup for Pereira, is kind of what I'm getting at. Now, I'm not suggesting that Pereira himself does not want to fight Ankalaev. In fact, we've heard the opposite. He's suggested, I think even before they rebooked the fight with the rematch with Yuri, that he wanted to fight Ankalaev then. So there's obviously interest on Pereira's end. Now, the question is the UFC protecting him from Ankalaev? I don't think so, but I do think it's going to be a tough matchup for Alex Pereira, because if you look at Ankalaev in his career, really well-rounded guy, got good wrestling. He's got really good, obviously, stand-up as well, too. But the key thing here for me is he's tough to finish. His only loss was by submission in a fight against Paul Craig, which he was winning the majority of the fight. And we've seen him have a lot of success against some pretty good opposition. I know people like to downplay the resume of Ankalaev, and I did an entire video on this on why I think Ankalaev should be the next title contender. I'm sure you can find it here on the channel if you want to do a quick search. It's a little bit outdated because obviously the fight's not happening now, but if you look here, I did a whole video on this a while ago, just talking about, this one here, about a month ago, saying that Ankalaev should be next in line. But the reason I like him is because he's extremely well-rounded, he's tough to take out, and he's good in a lot of different areas. And I don't think Pereira's going to get an easy knockout win like he's had over Yuri and Jamal Hill. We know Yuri gets hit a lot. I'm not discrediting Pereira's performances. I just think the style matchup is something different than what Pereira's fought in the last little bit. And what's the big question? Can someone get Pereira down on the ground, and can they wrestle him? Can they grapple with him? Ankalaev seems like that type of matchup. So from that perspective, I kind of agree with Cormier that it would be a tough fight for Pereira. I don't think it would be a walk in the park like a lot of Pereira fans are suggesting. But there's a lot of optics that I think DC didn't bring up, or maybe he did. I didn't see it in the interview. But there's a couple different things that we got to consider here when it comes to Alex Pereira and the UFC. Number one, he is company man number one here. He saved 2 cards, okay? UFC 300, he was the main event for that against Jamal Hill. Short notice fight for him as well, and Jamal. So he stepped up to the plate and took that fight for them. So there's that. Then he turns around 2 months later and fights Yuri, also saving another card, UFC 303, when obviously there was the Chandler and McGregor fight being off. So give the guy a break. He fought in November, then he fought in April, and then he fought in June. He needs a bit of a break. So this idea that Pereira's got to fight right away, I don't even mind if Pereira decides not to fight the rest of this year. I think he's earned it. I think he needs a bit of time off. Again, I know he didn't take much damage in those fights, but there's no reason for him to compete this much. So there's that thing that we got to talk about. The second thing we got to talk about, there's a lot of weird implications that could happen right now. I'm throwing these out there because I think these are possibilities. We've got the UFC 305 middleweight title fight this Saturday between champion Dricus du Plessis and Israel Adesanya. If Israel Adesanya wins that fight, I don't think it's that crazy that the UFC could put Adesanya in a position to fight Pereira for the light heavyweight title next, to get this big super fight, because obviously they have the rivalry not only from the UFC but in their kickboxing days as well. Wouldn't put it past the UFC for doing that. Again, the UFC doesn't mind getting creative with fights. I don't think that's a fight that makes any sort of sense whatsoever if Izzy just wins back his belt and then all of a sudden he gets to go to another weight class. Because remember, the last time Izzy went up to 205, he ended up losing to Jan Blachowicz. So that's scenario number one. Scenario number two is Tom Aspinall. Who's he going to fight next? I think if we're going just off merit, it's going to be the winner of Volkov and Gane. Their rematch, the winner of that should fight Aspinall. But what if the UFC is worried about John Jones and Stipe happening in November? I know I'm going a little conspiracy theory here. If that doesn't happen, could they pull Pereira out and do a Pereira-Izzy fight instead, or Pereira and Tom Aspinall fight instead on that card in New York in November? Wouldn't put it past the UFC for doing that. Again, they have Alex Pereira on speed dial if they need to get bailed out with cards. They've done it plenty of times this year. I think that's also another layer of this as to why Ankalaev's not fighting. And then obviously, if Ankalaev's not fighting, his last fight against Walker was in January. You want to keep active. It reminds me a bit of the whole Corey Sandhagen situation with him having to fight Umar. I mean, we had Merab and O'Malley booked. What does Sandhagen do? He you got to keep him active a little bit, whether you think he deserves it or not. Like, I'm in the camp that Ankalaev deserves a title shot. I was a bit surprised when they opted to, do Ankalaev and Rakic, because Rakic is coming off a loss. Ankalaev hasn't lost a fight since 2018. So from that perspective, doesn't make a ton of sense, but this way it keeps Ankalaev active. But like I said, I think the UFC's got some weird plans here for Pereira, and that could be a reason why they haven't done the Ankalaev fight. I don't think it's right, but I think Pereira should fight Ankalaev next. But again, I can also understand too where they need big fights on cards. They're doing cards every weekend. An Ankalaev Rakic fight is a pretty big fight on that event, right? That's the 308, if I'm not mistaken. That's a good fight on that card. So again, I think it's a combination of things. So to answer the question that Cormier says in the title of this video as well, I don't think that they are protecting Pereira. However, I do think that will be a tougher fight than people think. That's kind of what I'm getting at. Because there's a lot of, I don't know why, there's a lot of people who just discredit Ankalaev. Like, I got a bunch of negative feedback on the video with Ankalaev. He hasn't fought anyone. He beat Johnny Walker. Johnny Walker sucks. The way I look at Ankalaev is I look at the fact that, yes, Johnny Walker has not done that well. He's going to heavyweight now. We know this. But I look at the fact that Ozdemir, ranked opponent. Let's go back even further. Kutalaba was ranked at one point. Krylov's ranked. That's a good win. Ozdemir ranked. Thiago Santos was ranked at the time. Anthony Smith is ranked. Blachowicz, he goes to a draw. A lot of people felt like he won that fight. Then he gets 2 wins over Walker. These are all ranked opponents. So if you're beating ranked opponents, like, what more do you want? So I'm favoring him against Rakic. Spoiler alert, I think he gets it done. But like, yeah, I think that's more what it has to do. And, let's be honest here a little bit. And I've said this before in my live streams. Cormier is a little biased towards the Dagestani fighters. I don't believe Ankalaev trains at AKA, but that's still something that I'm not surprised for Cormier to say this. And also it makes a good headline. And look, we're even doing a video about it here today, but that's kind of my thoughts on it, is that I don't think the UFC is protecting Pereira. I think that they have other plans for Pereira that don't involve Ankalaev. Because let's be honest here, Ankalaev doesn't do a ton of media. Doesn't speak English. It's not like a big name that the UFC can use. The only way you can kind of use Ankalaev as a big name is if you put him on these Middle Eastern cards, right? Because obviously the crowd, very Muslim, they want to see those guys on these events. So they're saving him for that card. So, and listen, let's look at this another way too. Let's say Pereira was available and ready to go. Let's say he's healthy. Is that really fair to Pereira? Hey, we need you for UFC 300. Okay, I'm in. Hey, I need you for UFC 303. Okay, I'm in. Hey, by the way, we want you to defend your title in the Middle East, where the crowd is going to be pro Ankalaev because he's Muslim, and you can fight. You can fight there. I don't really think that's fair for Pereira. So personally, I think Pereira needs a break, and I think that's more the reason of why they didn't book this fight, and they just wanted to keep Ankalaev moving. And I also think there could be some other plans for Pereira, maybe moving up or having Izzy move up or whatever. I don't know. I just think there's a lot of different things at play. So I kind of. Yeah, long story short, I do not agree with Cormier that they were protecting Pereira, but I will say that is a very tough fight for Pereira, maybe more than people are giving it credit for. So I want to know what you guys think in the comment section below. Follow me on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, @Lynch on Sports. My name is James Lynch. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.